Broadcasting live from atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West. You are listening to the Liberty RoundTable Radio Talk Show.
All right, happy to have you along, my fellow Americans. Sam Bushman. I've got my buddy Lance Migliaccio with me, the Big Mig. George was with us for the last hour. Great job, George. Thank him. He had to go take care of some business, but Lance is with me. A little bit of pre-on-the-show adjustments. I got a new camera, and we're trying to get some things worked out with the new camera. Upgrades are always tough, especially when you're doing live. Normally, I try to test all this stuff in advance, but not feeling too well. Didn't have time to get that done. We had some issues with Lance's mic, but we got that all solved. So, hey, this is what live radio and TV is all about. Lance, welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Happy to be here as always and excited for the second half. Let's drop the hammer.
By the way, Lance, you sound so good, just so you know.
Well,
I'm just telling you right now, your audio is incredible now.
You know, invested in a new mixer, of course, based on what you guys, we weren't having as many issues on the show, but that other unit needed to be upgraded. So that is what it's all about. And, you know, that's what it takes time to get these shows fine-tuned. Audio is the toughest part, in my opinion.
There you have it. I think video is, but, you know, hey, there you go. It all depends on where you start, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so a couple of things. You know, I loved a lot of what Trump does. I really do. I love it. And I think he's the best president in my lifetime. Lance, I want you to kind of weigh in. Is Trump the best president in your lifetime?
You know, I think that's probably accurate. I think, you know, there is a tremendous amount because he got handed a tough situation. He's having to go into his fix. And I'm not sure every other president has dealt with that. His first term, he was attacked in a daily manner that really stopped him from being as effective as he could have been, which I think was a disservice to the American public. You know, so this is tough. I mean, he got handed a tough situation. Biden and the Congress really did a tremendous amount of damage to the country during that installed presidency.
Clinton, Obama, Bush, all of them for the last 100 years, they really created a criminal enterprise.
Yeah.
Some call it the deep state, some call it the shadow government. Use whatever terms you want to. It's a rough customer scenario, ladies and gentlemen. Everybody's on the take. It's an immoral fest, to say the least. The reason that I bring that up at the start of this discussion and the stories we're about to cover is because we still have much of what we hoped to get rid of. And yes, we've got rid of some of it. Yes, Trump's made a lot of difference, no doubt. But you know what? The deep state is way deeper than Trump thought it was. They really had their way with him the first go round. The second go round, he's doing a little bit better, but Congress really is, in my opinion, doing the worst damage to Trump now. They could be codifying a lot of what he's accomplished, but they're not. I mean, last night, even the State of the Union address said codify, codify, codify. So all I'm telling you is that, hey, the deep state continues, and unless we expose the deep state and change the game, we're going to get much of what we've already got. The Epstein files prove it. Trump ran on, let's get rid of them, let's expose them, let's release them, let's have accountability. No, let's don't. Let's cover it up. Hey, it's a Democrat hoax. Anybody who stood up for releasing the Epstein files, Trump wasn't loyal to us or loyal to his even campaign promises. He went back and forth on it and back and forth on it. And now to this day, I don't even know where he stands. At the end of the day, though, it's a big problem. And we're just getting a handle on what's really going on with this thing, Lance.
You know, the more we dig in, the more we recognize that the rabbit hole is much deeper. You know, everybody wants to call it conspiracy theory. And I think what's interesting is we're starting to really get some exposure on lots of different areas. Everybody was always wondering about Epstein's background and what he was really involved in. It seemed like he was given a lot of passes, got away with a lot of things, and nobody really understood why. And now it's becoming clear. Now, I got to give credit to Alex Jones. He was talking about this 18 years ago. This isn't new. And considering, you know, as you know, Sam, I was a government contractor, and I worked around operations that could probably be considered black ops. Because again, that's what the contractors do. Deniable accountability. This government and other governments use them.
And let's be honest, there's a legitimate reason and a need for it. Let's be clear too.
Absolutely. But I think it's been a slow climb. I think there was a time when black budgets, dark budgets, or black ops might have had better intent. But as the people that operated those systems recognized that here's a budget, we were given, you know, $100 million to do it, and there's 70 or 80 million left over, that didn't go back to the Treasury. They kept that money and it got funneled around. And I think as time went on, it got funneled and funneled and funneled. And what we're talking about for the audience is there's now come out this DEA report that the DEA and the CIA and Epstein created a black market pipeline. It looks like Epstein was most likely running guns, drugs, and sex slaves. We already knew about the trafficking for the CIA out of airports in Ohio, New Jersey, and New Mexico. And that DEA, investigation report you're seeing there on the screen, it seems to prove it. It's a scandal.
And I want to tie this together really quick, Lance. Yeah. 30 years ago, I was reporting on Bill Clinton and the Arkancides. So many deaths around Bill and Hillary Clinton and their drug running out of Mena, Arkansas. I literally interviewed experts that were contractors, Terry Reed and many others who highlighted this. And there was drug run. So that's all tied together, see, and that's why it's just shocking to me that, we're just letting Bill Clinton seem to slide on this thing. Those two stories really are hand in hand, believe it or not, Lance.
Yeah, because look, all these agencies are always looking for a budget that isn't completely outlined, because there are a lot of operations where you do need cash, you do need funding. I watched lots of things on multi-agency task force teams when I was overseas that if anybody, the American public, really was watching it, they would be confused about what had occurred. Large amounts of currency, large amounts of weapons, interactions out in the middle of nowhere. Things that, of course, would look like it was a mafia-controlled operation. And the CIA is the worst of the worst. There's been very little oversight. We've seen, we haven't seen the Department of Defense pass an audit in decades now. Trillions of dollars missing. We've talked about the dark budgets of NASA, that some of these numbers don't add up. So here we are. The DEA is not new to this, but here they are doing an investigation. That report is talking about this organized crime drug enforcement task force fusion center. And they're talking about a target profile on Jeffrey Epstein. That document was part of a much larger batch of Epstein related files that were released by the DOJ in recent months. But of course, now they're saying they really didn't understand the complexity of what they were looking at. I think that's a bunch of garbage. They don't want to look like they were guilty, but I think Epstein was working with the CIA, was working with Mossad. And this investigation,
and the DEA even,
December of 2010, Sam. So they knew a lot about Epstein back in 2010. You tell me why he was allowed to continue to operate.
Well, and also the DEA, you got to wonder too, the FBI, which we don't have a lot of dots connected on that. But for example, Pambondian Company, others, how did he get the passes in Florida, the special protection in Florida that he got? Him, along with, according to Ghislaine Maxwell, 25 plus people got special privilege protection in that deal. How does that happen? And where does that buck stop, Lance?
Well, Florida was quid pro quo. As everybody knows, the standard operating procedure for the Department of Justice, FBI, DEA, ATF, is that the internal policy is give us 3, go free. Meaning that if you can bring high value targets, big financial busts, there is a likelihood that you will get a massive downward departure on your criminality, maybe even a full pass, depending on how helpful you are. Epstein traded for that Florida case 4, maybe even 5 hedge fund managers that were laundering money. Of course, the DOJ loves that. They love targets where there's lots of money to be clawed back, because that money goes into their budgets and it's not earmarked like other budgets where they have to specifically spend it on computers. So they can, do remodels on their offices. They can buy new vehicles, things that weren't approved initially by Congress, because that's what happens when you get seizures. Now, it doesn't surprise me that Epstein got a sweetheart deal, 4 or 5 hedge fund managers laundering money. It's a great opportunity for the Department of Justice. And that's how they do it. It's not necessarily about enforcing the law or who's the worst criminal. In the case of Epstein, I would have to think that the trafficking of individuals would be a much higher priority, because those are Americans that got violated in one way or another. But that's not how it works. That's
not if you're into the filthy lucre, and not if you're, what if a lot of the people that are literally supposed to prosecute this case, their bosses have ties to Jeff in special ways to where they're like, hey, we're not touching this with a 10-foot pole. So we're going to let these low fruit hanging kind of people go. And we're going to, claw back a bunch of the money and do what you're saying. Justice isn't justice anymore, right?
Well, let's be hypothetical. Let's say that Epstein was in fact assisting the CIA, was in fact assisting the Mossad, was assisting in intelligence gathering. Of course, we know he was blackmailing and compromising high profile individuals from all walks of life. do you think that this doesn't happen? And I'll throw this to you, Sam. The DOJ, let's say they're investigating Sam Bushman, and Sam Bushman is working with the CIA and Mossad. He's providing intelligence. He's compromising. He's catching videos and audio of high-profile government officials from this country and others, high-profile individuals that could be valuable to the U.S. government. Do you think that when the DOJ brings a prosecution, even if it's because these agencies don't communicate about everything laterally, sometimes they don't know about it, like this DEA having Epstein listed as target 4. Do you think, Sam, that the DOJ doesn't get calls from the CIA like, hey, you got to leave Bushman alone? He's helping us with gun running in El Salvador. Or the DEA.
And you don't understand the whole picture as this thing is siloed. You don't get what we know. You've got to lay off. And, hey, do you do what your boss tells you or do you get fired? What happens, right? When we come back, Lance continues to break this down. You're watching the one and only Liberty Roundtable Live.
In the medical field, IT security is crucial. Our highly skilled consultants are HIPAA certified and have 20-plus years of experience servicing medical clinics, billing, and supply companies. We offer comprehensive endpoint protection, guarding your computers and servers against all stages of threats. And with our 24/7 monitoring services, you'll never worry about extensive downtime again. Ready to level up your IT support? Call 801-706-6980 today and discover how great IT services can be with managed IT services.
Experience the untamed spirit of the American West with Range Magazine. Each issue is a visual journey featuring award-winning photography and compelling stories that capture the heart of ranching and rural life. Stay informed on the challenges and triumphs of those who live and work on the land. Subscribe today and receive quarterly editions delivered to your doorstep and join a community that cherishes the enduring legacy of the Western frontier. Visit rangemagazine.com to subscribe.
The Foundation for Moral Law is a nonprofit legal foundation committed to protecting our unalienable right to publicly acknowledge God. The Foundation for Moral Law exists to restore the knowledge of God in law and government and to acknowledge and defend the truth that man is endowed with rights not by our fellow man, but by God. The Foundation maintains a twofold focus. First, litigation within state and federal courts. Second, education, conducting seminars to teach the necessity and importance of acknowledging God in law and government. How can you help? Please make a tax-deductible contribution, allowing Foundation attorneys to continue the fight. You may also purchase various Foundation products as well at morallaw.org. Located in Montgomery, Alabama, the Foundation for Moral Law is a nonprofit, tax-exempt 501c3 founded by Judge Roy Moore. Please partner with us to achieve this important mission. morallaw.org.
Welcome back to Liberty Roundtable Live. Here we are dropping the rain and the pain. Sam Bushman, Lance Migliaccio. We're talking about Epstein. Sam, wait a minute. We're not supposed to be talking about Epstein, I thought.
Here we are. That's the reality check, ladies and gentlemen. See, Donald Trump, no offense, but he's literally been a flip-flopper on this, and that's really the problem that I have. I don't know why he's taken different positions. I don't know if he didn't know what was out there. I don't know how much. This is the problem, as you mentioned right before the pause. Who knew what when? Who knew? And very few people really know all is the problem, right?
Yeah, there's no doubt. These agencies do silo the information. They're in their own verticals. And in this case, you're talking about an investigation that was focused on a tremendous amount of suspicious international wire transfers, totaling around $50 million routed through accounts in Switzerland, France, the Cayman Islands, and New York. And the DEA had, as they were investigating, we're talking about these transfers were probably tied to illicit drug and or prostitution activities in the U.S. Virgin Islands, of course, where Little St. James was, now known as Lolita Island, and New York City. And these agencies, there was multiple agencies involved. The DEA was involved. The ATF was involved, Customs and Border Patrol, ICE, Immigration, IRS, U.S. Marshals, U.S. Postal Service, Secret Service, National Zoological Park, which I don't know why that's there. I don't know if that was a typo or what.
Don't even go there, Lance. It's not a typo. Just don't go there, my friend.
Yeah, I don't know if he was using barn animals. I don't know what's going on here. But here's the point. But you don't see anything about the CIA because, of course, they run in their own vertical, just like the DIA and the NSA. They don't necessarily cross over into what they consider below them standard domestic organizations. So, and that's the problem. The CIA, it looks like they were deeply entrenched. We said it many times. Look, for the audience, we have sources that were with the FBI raids. We have one individual that George and I have been in communications with that was actually on every raid, was there for the St. James, was there for the New York Brownstone, was there for the West Palm Beach raid and the New Mexico, property raid. And they talked, and he talked about it, said that a lot of the technology they'd pulled out of these places where they had audio and video surveillance and the hard drives, it was Mossad, surveillance technology. It was Israeli built. So that in itself tells you a lot. And of course,
and there becomes the debate too. The question becomes: are you allowed to bring up this Israel connection? Are you allowed to bring up this Mossad connection and Jeffrey Epstein? And so there's a lot of reasons that this doesn't come to light. There's a lot of reasons that the dots aren't being connected. George and others. Let's see, what's his name? Friends in Low Places. What's that guy's name? It's not George. It's he's a country singer. What's his name? Anyway, I've got friends in low places. Well, these guys have friends in high places.
George
right?
Strait? Were you talking about George Strait?
No, not George Strait. It's I'll work on it. Anyway,
I'm not a country music guy.
So friends in low places, right? But these guys have friends in high places. And the problem is that network of friends in high places really expands to everybody in governments and partners around the world. That's really the bottom line, right?
Well, when you're dealing with intelligence material, they always talk about whose product is this. If you got different organizations and somehow that's been disseminated in a manner, they talk about whose product. Now, this memo talks about this product containing proprietary law enforcement information that should not be treated as a finished investigation product or disseminated without coordination through these specific agencies. And that's what they all do. They all like to have their work product be separate. They only share it when they're obligated to do so because they're all like, oh, I'm not going to give it to them and they're not going to give it to me. But they do that intentionally because, of course, it does give them a massive amount of deniable accountability because they can also say, well, we had no idea the FBI was investigating or the D. Now, again, we know that not to be true because when surveillance occurs, there are surveillance notices a lot of times, and that is shared because nobody wants to get caught. The CIA doesn't want to get caught being surveilled by the DEA and talking about some of their strategic moves, because some of those include operations that the American public would freak out if they found out about.
So and once in a while, we get a little leak here or there, too. For example, we heard about the CIA involved with, hey, they had laptops and drugs with prostitutes, and there's a little blip here or there. But what you get is a blip here or there. You get Jeffrey Epstein getting busted here or there, but you don't really see the whole house of cards come down at all. And by the way, it was Garth Brooks that I was trying to think of, and I don't know why George was on my mind, but Garth Brooks. But all I'm telling you is there's a blip that comes out here or there. We've basically documented over the years, over and over and over, about the CIA being involved in drug running. That's not just a Bill Clinton thing. That's not just a Jeffrey Epstein thing. That's a continued running narrative where that's been exposed. Bo Wrights back in the 90s was literally a high decorated Green Beret military guy who highlighted drug running out of, Laos and other places like that. And that the government was involved in that. And he tried to expose it then. And we've had over and over and over examples with evidence of this happening. And so the real issue that I have is that we're not going to ever get to the bottom of the Epstein files. We're not. We never will. And what we really won't know is this. I mean, Ghislaine's in prison in a very light, special privilege situation, which is concerning in and of itself. But the other girlfriend of Jeffrey Epstein, for example, she got $100 million out of the payout of Jeffrey Epstein's money and everything else. No one's even looking into her. She's not even under investigation for that matter. And you kind of go, how can that be? She was that close to him in every way, but she knew nothing and was involved in nothing. I'm telling you, if you believe that, I've got some Arizona beachfront property for you. I mean, this is crazy town, but I'm telling you right now, there's too many friends in high places, sadly, even including Donald to some degree, and you'll never get to the bottom of this, Lance. You will not.
I agree wholeheartedly. Listen, I know a guy, he's passed away now, that was a helicopter pilot that had very accurate information about his involvement with the CIA, flying out opium and heroin from the Golden Triangle. He talked about taking it to C-130s, it being loaded on, and that there were CIA operatives involved. And his information was way too accurate to have been created or fabricated. But, that's the thing, right? the CIA identified the drug trade as a great way to move money around. The Clintons did the same thing. Anybody out there that doesn't think that this government has committed lots of crimes that a regular person would be convicted for is sadly mistaken. I feel bad for them that they even assume that everything is, or the spreading of international democracy or the protection of the U.S. government, because a lot of those drugs came into the United States. But in this case, this timeline is strange because this investigation on Epstein on this first case in that DEA report seems to start around 2006. Gets more serious in 2007 and 8. Now here he is, Florida goes ahead and he was convicted in 2008 on those state prostitution charges in Florida. He gets that lenient plea deal. Then he's indicted in 2019. But look at that time period. Here's a guy that they knew was in a lot of nefarious activities. Why was he allowed to continue this concurrent criminal enterprise? And
think how many people he was involved with at universities, at government levels. I mean, even the Epstein files shows the Mormon Church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, having interactions with him. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm going to be very clear. If you study the Mormon Church's interactions with him, I don't think there's any dirt on the Mormon Church per se. But again, for example, he paid for scholarships for girls at colleges. That's where Brigham Young University, Idaho, I think it is, or others were involved and some things like that. A lot of people were involved for legitimate, appropriate reasons. And if they're not tied into knowing what's really happening, they're innocently involved, Lance.
Is there, the thing is there really such a word as innocence? Because if we're working this as federal agents and you work what they call the wheel, they start on the outside with the people that they say might be innocent or aren't really deeply involved, and they hopefully work their way into the center hub of the conspiracy, right? Of the racketeering.
That's right. Sure.
Look, all these people participated. We know that there was lots of participants in the trafficking. There's lots of people that probably slept with these young girls. And we know drugs were involved. We've already seen the reports about Xanax and ecstasy and cocaine. They use that on the girls to lower inhibitions. Even though Epstein was never known as a drug lord, he definitely was known as a money launderer, and you need money laundering in criminal operations. When proceeds are produced, that money has to be put somewhere, and you have to figure out how to bump accounts and drop accounts. You don't want to get involved with know your client documentation or red flag notices at banks. That's why they go international. That's why they even use Hawala banking. There's lots involved, but
and that's why they bring in people who aren't really knowledgeable. For example, if somebody offers to pay for a girl's tuition and that money goes to the tuition, for example, I mean, the university can't just investigate every trail of money that comes from where. And so I'm not really trying to say everybody should be innocent, but what I'm saying is, hey, with the silos of who knew what, where, and stuff like that, I think a lot of innocent people or a lot of people who didn't really realize were drug into this thing. And what we're doing now is releasing the Epstein files with tons of redactions, and then we're pointing the fingers all over the place to just make it more messy. In other words, when you look at investigations, if they're really looking for a target, if they're really getting to the bottom of an investigation, this is true with Epstein, this is true with the Charlie Kirk assassination, and so on. When things get narrower over time, you believe they're honing in on this wheel that you mentioned. As they get towards the center, it gets more clear. Timelines are nailed down. Transactions are documented. Okay, but in the Epstein files and in Charlie Kirk's murder and everything else, it goes the opposite way. It gets more complicated, more convoluted, and more confusing as it broadens. It doesn't narrow. That's on purpose, Lance.
Listen, and that's the idea, right? Lots of layers, lots of disconnections, lots of redirection. That's how intelligence organizations work. Sleight of hand. Look over here while we're moving the drugs over here. They got to move it around, Sam. Keep it uneven.
And then they've got to bring people in that are literally don't have anything to do with it too, to try to muddy the waters of, who's really the bad guy here, kind of a thing. I don't know where Donald stands in this thing, but I do know this. He's certainly flip-flopped on this, and that brings me great concern. Do we still have a crime boss that took Jeffrey Epstein's place? And do we still have this criminal network continuing? That's the real, in my opinion, $64,000 question. When we get back, we've even got more, if you can believe it, ladies and gentlemen. Sam Bushman, Lance Migliaccio, the Big Mig, and Liberty Roundtable live.
Exposing corruption, informing citizens, pursuing liberty. You're listening to Liberty News Radio.
Breaking news this hour from Town Hall. I'm Rich Thomason. Notable for its length, President Trump's epic State of the Union speech last night ran almost 2 hours, a record. Declaring the State of the Union strong, Mr. Trump doubled down on his tariff and immigration policy.
Just days after the Supreme Court struck down his global tariffs, the president said he will continue with tariffs through other regulations and that the tariffs will
substantially replace the modern-day system of income tax.
With justices sitting a few feet away, he described their ruling as unfortunate. The president also defended his administration's efforts to deport undocumented immigrants, and he announced Vice President Vance will lead a new effort called the War on Fraud. Greg Clugston, Washington.
And there were some patriotic feel-good moments with the Olympic champion U.S. men's hockey team on hand and medals presented to military members and veterans. Democrat response to the president's address.
Americans deserve to know that their leaders are focused on addressing the problems that keep them up at night.
Virginia's newly elected Governor Abigail Spanberger asking, is the president working to make life more affordable for you, your family? Democrats, not the only ones reacting to the speech.
I think it was a good night for the president. It was certainly a celebration of all that is good for America and what America has meant. I thought it was a great night for the president.
Family Research Council President Tony Perkins giving President Trump high marks for his address. Adding insult to injury in the Northeast. Bit more snow fell across parts of the region overnight, generally 1 to 3 inches on top of all that snow the blizzard left behind earlier this week. Watching Wall Street, stocks are higher. The Dow is trading up about 104 points. The Nasdaq ahead 221 points. More on these stories, townhall.com.
Hi, it's Mike Gallagher. A lot of us are thinking about taxes, home projects we've been putting off, ways to get ahead financially in 2026. Now's the perfect time to talk to my friends at Fellowship Home Loans. If you want to lower your mortgage payment, they can help you refinance. If you need access to cash for home improvements or to wipe out high-interest debt, their fixed-rate line of credit is one of the best tools out there. Fast approval, predictable rate, and flexibility to use your home's equity wisely. Remember, many people still qualify to skip their next 2 mortgage payments. Imagine starting big projects or paying down debt with 2 months of breathing room. My family and I have used Fellowship personally. I trust these guys. Take control of 2026. Go to fellowshiphomeloans.com/Mike G. fellowshiphomeloans.com/Mike G. fellowshiphomeloans.com/Mike G. or call 800-510-MIKE. That's 800-510-6453. Fellowship Home Loans, mortgage lending by the book.
Nationwide Mortgage Bankers, DBA Fellowship Home Loans, Equal Housing Lender, NMLS number 819382.
My brother and 2 other boys were the ones that got in the car with her, and she was drunk. The road that goes to her house is like really windy, and she was taking that road at 80 to 100 miles per hour and hit into the road barriers. Her door flung open. She ran out across the street to get away from it, and the other 3 boys were trapped in it, and the car exploded. And then when my mom found out about it, she called me at work. I don't care what you have to do, just get up here to the hospital. I parked my car and I went inside. And they took us back to this little room. My mom told me that Jay had been killed. And I lost it. The other people, because they're like, well, you can drink, but just be careful when you drink, you know? So I don't want anything to do with it, because it took my brother away from me.
A public service message from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Are you ready to stand up for your community and support your local sheriff? Join the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association and become a vital member of the Sheriff's Citizens Posse. At cspoa.org, we empower citizens like you through weekly webinars, arming you with the knowledge to back your constitutional county sheriff. Together, we can uphold our Constitution and ensure liberty and justice for all. Your community needs you now more than ever.
This is a battle between truth and deceit. A battle between forces that would enslave this country in darkness and between a media that wants to present you with the truth. We are being censored. America's news outlets no longer provide the truth. 90% of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. The mission of the Epoch Times is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in fact.
TheEpochTimes.com.
Welcome back to Liberty Roundtable Live. And yes, we are still talking about Epstein. It's not going to stop. That's how we do it. It's a tip of the spear here. Well, look, you know, when you talk about Epstein, there is no doubt that there are more questions than answers at this point. We were just discussing this DEA report, the DEA investigation. And I think when you start talking about drugs and weapons, you always have to talk about the high-profile names that are showing up again and again in the Epstein document release. I often wonder what documents have been destroyed, what haven't we seen. But one of the names that everybody should know is Adnan Khashoggi. Now, Epstein had a real interest in military tech, and he was constantly dialoguing in one way or another. And, of course, he had connections to the arms dealer, Adnan. Interestingly enough, there was a guy named here, Phil Lowry, in town, who was Adnan Khashoggi's attorney. I knew Phil for years. He's passed away now, but I heard lots of stories about Assad, the arms broker, who, of course, was linked to the Iran-Contra debacle. But Epstein, look, I think he liked this lifestyle. Maxwell's father, of course, we know, was directly tied to the Mossad. He was a Mossad operative for decades. And this DEA memo, it talks about a lot of sources, which would have connected Epstein to not only the drugs, but large-scale gun running. He had access to jets. He had access to private planes. He had relationships with Deutsche Bank and many others. And I think there's one thing that you guys really need to hear about, Sam, and I want to say this. One of the most important and persistent Epstein conspiracies really isn't a conspiracy. In 2008, in that Epstein Florida plea deal, the prosecutor justified that plea deal. And that we're talking about Alexander Acosta, who later became Trump's labor secretary. He said Epstein, and I quote, belonged to intelligence and that the case was above his pay grade. As I mentioned earlier, that's what happens to prosecutors and other what the CIA or DIA or NSA would consider lower level agencies. They pick up the phone and say, you got to lay off Epstein. He's working with us. I can't tell you the more of that because this is above your pay grade. Now, if that's not a claim to CIA, Mossad, or other intelligence connections, I don't know what is, Sam.
It's tragic, but it's reality. And that's what I meant when I said earlier that he has so many ties to so many places, some good, some bad, some for the right reasons, at least it appears on the surface, some for the wrong reasons. He even turned right reason contacts into wrong reasons. And who knew about what, when? Who was really involved and really squared away and knew? I don't even know at this point. And most of these people, you'll never get on the stand to get the real answers, right? I mean, that's really why we'll never get to the bottom of this, is you'll never get these people on the stand. Many of them aren't alive. Many of them are out of the country. Many of them work for hostile government agents. So on one hand, we think they're our enemies. Just take Iran and others, for example, and you kind of go, wait a minute. Who was involved? We'll never connect those dots. I mean, when you talk about links to drugs and prostitution, what about weapons? What about the military connectivity, as you mentioned? Where does that go? We can say there's longstanding theories. Well, theories are theories, but there's also facts. The problem is documenting those facts is going to be near to impossible. We can do investigative reporting. We can connect a lot of this. But, I mean, why wasn't Alex Jones, for example, taken seriously 18 years ago? Right?
Yeah, because I'm sure they treat Alex Jones in the way that they always like to frame him. And he's been very intuitive. He's been a great investigative journalist. I know some people are like, I don't know about Alex Jones. They say that, but the guy's been over the target so many times that he ought to be given a much more serious look when he brings up a claim, because he has lots of great resources. Look, when you have to look at where there's smoke, there's fire. And many people have over and over again said that in fact, Epstein was connected, that Epstein was intelligence. Look, Ari I think it's Ben Menashe, who, of course, was an ex-spy for the Mossad. He said that Epstein was running honey traps for the Mossad and the CIA. Now, when you start getting these claims that's enough that further investigation should have been necessary, because this wouldn't be the first time.
Yeah, but then you bump up against Israel, and then everybody's like, oh, we can't touch that. We're not going to talk about Israel. That's the third rail. We're not doing that there. And now it's all basically shut down, right?
Well, I got to say this. You have to look at what is going on there. When somebody claims that, it wouldn't be the first time that somebody working for intelligence took that as an opportunity to further their criminal enterprise, that they went beyond the agreement. Now, I'm not saying that's not possible with Epstein, but there are enough organizations involved that I'm sure they're going to give us the old, shh, don't talk about Epstein because this is a national security interest, Sam.
No, you understand that Iran is the biggest source of terror in the world, right?
Yes. And we definitely have to talk about this. So Iran has been doing a lot of saber rattling, lots of claims that are asymmetric war pivot. And what we're talking about is that their military doctrine, they're trying to say that our military naval forces are not of a concern to them, right? Because they have decided that their forward defense or their offensive defense is prioritizing these low-cost, high-volume assets to deter or maybe even disrupt U.S. expeditionary forces. Now, we're talking about the forces in the Persian Gulf. I think, and they call this the Mosquito fleet. Now, I have to say, Iran has made a very aggressive move and a very sophisticated move into drone warfare. So they say they're revolutionary.
Hold on, let's be really clear so everybody understands. If they haven't read this, they're kind of, you're going fast. I don't mean to slow you down and waste time, but I want people to understand this. Mosquito fleet relates to these tiny, tiny boats that are super fast, and they can maneuver and twist and turn, and there's so many of them, they can literally create an assault on some of our slower, military, super laden, heavy, super high power, if you will, situations, but they can overwhelm us. Not only can they do it in the water, but with drones, they can do it in the air. Go ahead.
Well, look, and you're right. And the technology here, their plan is that these boats can, run at speeds of 50 to 60 knots. So for the non-nautical, that's around 57 to 69 miles per hour, which is very fast on water, faster than a torpedo. But I'm not sure this. When they talk about this, they kind of discount U.S. military technology. Now, they're talking about the military technology they're aware of. What about the stuff they don't know about? I hate to use the name because it's one of those Trumpisms, but like the discombobulator, does everybody think we're just a one-trick pony? Sam, do you think that's the only high-tech directed energy weapon that we have?
I think we have way more high-tech than they give us credit for. The problem is that I don't want to go there and have to use their tech or our tech. And when we say that, hey, Iran will never get a nuclear weapon, that was even doubled down on by Donald last night and everything else. Number one, who's to say they don't already have one? Number one. Number two, you got to remember, it isn't Iran all by themselves as some third world, who knows what, 2-bit, whatever. Iran is backed by some of the highest communist agitators in the world. And so you got to understand, we're not just talking about Iran is the problem, right?
Yeah, there's no doubt. And of course, that's why some of their stuff is so high tech. Even some of these anti-ship missiles, the Nasir, the Kawasar, the Ghadir, a lot of those are based on, I believe, blueprints and technology-driven systems that were supplied by China, supplied by Russia. So, look, is this swarm attack going to work? And I think we should throw up the video. Let's show the audience what they're talking about. Now, these boats are equipped with these 107 millimeter rockets, recoilless rifles, even torpedoes. The plan is to swarm our larger naval forces and like a 20-plus boat approach where they overwhelm U.S. technology. I don't think
they're going to do it in the water with these Mosquito fleets. They're going to do it in the air with their drones. Iran is becoming a drone superpower because they're backed by who, Lance?
They're backed by China and Russia.
Oh, boy. Can we saturate the defenses is the question? Or can they, I shouldn't say we, but can they saturate our defenses?
I don't know. I'm going to say not, because there are laser systems and other technologies. Now, I have heard some things from the administration that they're planning on, if this kicks off, they're planning on using a lot of technology that nobody has ever seen before.
And that's on both sides of the equation.
Yeah, well, I do think that, but I have to say this, after looking at the way the Maduro raid went, I suspect that Iran is in for some ugly surprises here.
For now, yes. Whether that'll be long-term reality, time will tell. But I'm telling you, sadly, the war is on, whether we've declared it or not. They say drones complement the fleet, the Mosquito fleet. It's reconnaissance, but it's also jamming U.S. radar and their strike capabilities. How much can they jam? How much can they interrupt communications? If they can get that done, all bets are off, right?
Well, there's no doubt that that'll definitely have an impact. Let's face it, communications on battlefields are extremely important. But I don't think they're going to be able to jam some of the laser tracking systems. And some of the systems I understand have gotten incredibly sophisticated. There are multi-laser tracking systems, multiple targets, up to hundreds of targets at a time. And, of course, you're talking about the speed of light. So we'll have to see. I know this is going to kick off soon. Trump is not going to give them much more wiggle room than he already has.
And ladies and gentlemen, we're not trying to heighten Iran to say we should be in fear. We're just telling you this isn't going to be a cakewalk like everybody makes it seem. This is war, and many people, sadly, will die.
Cybercrime is exploding. Take Sarah from Sweet Delights, whose world crumbled after having to close with not being able to bounce back. Small businesses are prime targets, but the right strategies can keep yours safe. Jay Hill, CEO of Network Providers, has co-authored The Cyber Playbook Simplifies Cybersecurity for Business Owners with Strategies to avoid costly breaches and fines. Build a strong cyber attack response. Secure your business with key protections. Cyber threats aren't slowing down, but you can stay ahead. Protect your business. Ensure its security for tomorrow. Get the Cyber Playbook today at networkprovidersinc.com/cyber-playbook or call 385-446-5500 now.
Looking for an IT partner that truly understands your needs? Managed IT Services is the answer. We meet with you regularly to discuss your goals and form a tailored technology plan. Our customers have called us a trusted advisor who delivers. When it comes to IT, we do it all. Firewalls, cloud storage, server migration, and more. Say goodbye to long-term contracts and hello to a team that earns your business month after month. Call 801-706-6980 now and let Managed IT Services transform your IT experience.
Have you ever had great honey? No, I mean really good, all-natural, raw honey? Well, now you can, thanks to localhoneyman.com. We can ship out our locally made honey all across the U.S. So don't worry, you won't miss out. Plus, Local Honeyman has so many different flavors, like Utah Wildflower, High Desert Delight, Happy Valley, and Blackberry, just to name a few. So purchase your delicious raw honey today at localhoneyman.com.
All right, Lance, I know we got a little time and a lot to cover still, but I want to really drill into this. It almost seems like the communist Chinese and others, Russia, who are backing Iran. Iran's becoming a superpower, not necessarily because they could on their own, but because of who they're backed by. It's almost like the communist Chinese and the Russians want to get the upper hand. And they don't know what technology we have, and they're convinced they have some technology we're not counting on. I don't know that I believe that's true. Nevertheless, they're hoping to try to force a show and tell to try to figure out, hey, do we have enough of the upper hand yet or not? That's kind of really the question in their minds and in my mind, and they're trying to force the show and tell to see if they can figure that out. Isn't that what this is about, really?
Well, look, if you were China and Russia, wouldn't you send Iran out to be the slaughtered pig if you thought you could find out more about the U.S. military's technological capabilities? Let's use Iran. Who cares? We'll have them go out there and cause a fight. Maybe
we can also pretend we're not about it. So whatever technology we show, we'll show as minimal technology as we can, but make you show as much as you can. And then we'll act like it's yesteryear's technology, even though it might be our latest technology. We'll act like we're 10 times above that. It's all that game too, right?
Yeah, there's no doubt. And the Gulf is a very difficult battlefield. The Strait of Hormuz, you've got a situation where it's shallow water, there's mines. And of course, the U.S. government, and when you look at the cost, that their carrier is, $13 billion for a carrier. The Tomahawk missiles are $1 million a piece. The investment by Iran with these small boats and drones about $50,000 to $1 million a piece. Much cheaper, investment. Doesn't mean that it's not strategically capable. I'm just not sure that Iran should be as cocky as they are. I know that they have to do that because they want to take a position that they're not afraid of what's going to happen. But the Ayatollah's behavior would, of course, prove otherwise. He's shipping out his gold.
You got to be cocky enough to force the show and tell, Lance.
Yeah, there's no doubt. But he is shipping out a lot of products. He's already talking about his replacement. I think if this does kick off, I'm going to say one thing. I don't think this is going to be like previous interactions with Iran. I think this time Israel and the United States, if they do decide to go in, I think they're gonna go all in and wipe out every part of that regime and start from scratch. Maybe
I think they're going to do that, but in order to do that, they're going to have to show enough of our technology to betray us almost.
Sure,
I don't want that. I'm just telling you the reality.
Yeah. Well, I also think the reality is I don't think we can allow Iran to continue to do what they're doing. They're a big problem in the Middle East, and their funding of terrorist organizations. I don't think we can allow it to continue. They're an extremist group, and I think if we do that, it isn't a matter of if, it'll be a matter of when they continue to do what they're going to do.
Well, here's the question. Was Jeffrey Epstein partnering with and funding terrorist organizations as well?
I wouldn't doubt that Jeffrey Epstein was doing everything possible to pursue the agenda of Jeffrey Epstein, which was, I believe, greed, sex, and drugs. I think he was all about that, and anything that helped him live the lifestyle he chose. It wasn't about spreading democracy or helping intelligence organizations. It was about helping Jeffrey Epstein live a life of depravity. So if that meant money, I think Jeffrey Epstein would have done whatever it was.
Sad but true, ladies and gentlemen. That brings up the biggest identity breach, or what do you want to call it in history, Lance?
This is exactly what you just called it. It is the largest, over 1 billion records globally, 204 million records here in the United States. I don't know what our population is because I don't know how to get a grip on the illegal immigrants, but let's say we're somewhere between 330 and 360 million. I think that's close enough. 204 million records. Those records included full names, postal address, date of birth, phone numbers, and emails.
Can I ask a question? Are there any records left?
I don't know, because think about it. You're gonna exclude the kids, right? Because of course the kids in a lot of cases aren't submitting KYC, and what we're talking about is know your client data for crypto companies, for the banking industry, for financial institutions. But not only did they get the information I just described,
know your client unless it's Jeff, then you don't know your client there.
Exactly. You don't have to know your client if it's Jeffrey Epstein, because it's Jeffrey Epstein. We're working with him. Be quiet. The point is passport copies, ID cards, and lots of official documents from 26 different countries, Sam.
You can't get more pertinent data either. What I mean is this isn't just the tertiary data. This is like hardcore data, right?
Yeah, and this wasn't an attack. It wasn't hackers invading. So all these ultra sensitive records came from these KYC processes from banks, fintech companies, insurance companies, crypto companies, telecom operators. It was one company, and Sam, you know the technology, so I'm going to throw to you on this. I guess they discovered an entire MongoDB database, over 1 terabyte, that was completely open on the internet. No password, no encryption, no administrative control. Just, hey, let's just put the records out there. I mean, is that a catastrophic configuration error, or is that something that's common?
It's intentional. It's not a configuration error at all, because if you understand Mongo databases in the first place, then you understand that they require a lot of configuration and maintaining, and that simply wasn't done. So how you can control those databases and do what you want with them, but yet not provide the security for them is beyond me. And isn't this interesting that this ties back to election integrity issues, believe it or not? Isn't it our buddies over at True the Vote and everybody else that said, hey, we found all the voter registration information on Mongo databases controlled by the communist Chinese, Lance?
Yes, you are right. You know, it's funny. Every time you say Mongo, I think of Blazing Saddles. I can't help myself because I think the one guy on there, his name was Mongo, that knocked out the horse. Old school movie there. But look, yeah, that definitely happened. But this is incredible. You would think that the people that are in control of this data, if you're working on this system, right, and you're running this company, and your job is to protect that specific part, wouldn't all the directives in your company be focused on, hey, do not let the quarterback be exposed? I just can't figure out how.
But maybe your job was the opposite, Lance. Maybe we think that's what the job was supposed to be. Maybe it was supposed to be make sure this stuff gets hacked and make sure there's plausible deniability.
And you know what I think is further frightening, and you might very well be right, Sam, about what you just said, because, of course, I always wonder when these massive data hacks happen, the amount of money that gets stolen. Does that money really go to some criminal hacker somewhere in the Netherlands that's sitting in his mom's basement? Or is it a much bigger part of a larger operation, acting like as if it's the little guy in the hacker group, and maybe it's intelligence organizations? Maybe they're funneling the money to Epstein or other black budgets. Who knows? But here's the part I don't understand. This seems to be a gigantic story to me. We covered it on our show over on Rumble the other day. Sam, where's the mainstream media on this? This has not really been covered. Isn't this a gigantic story that they should be warning Americans? Maybe two-factor authentication. Maybe people should go in and change their passwords. I'm trying to figure out why nobody wants to talk about this.
Because they want your information.
Wow.
Okay, I don't mean to be rude, but you're right. This would be red flag numero uno if it was, hey, we can still preserve any of your data. What they're telling you is your data is already so far gone, there's no reason to protect it. So I don't know if you know, but MongoDB started by a group that created, it's called 10Gen. That's who created it. And then they renamed themselves MongoDB in 2013. MongoDB comes from the name humongous or large scale data. This is intentional, Lance. This is not a mistake.
Wow.
That's the part people need to understand. So when you say, well, why aren't they? Because they intentionally want this to happen. Remember, even if you study the Bible, Lance, they say in the last days, all things shall be known and shouted from the rooftops. This is part of unfolding prophecy, buddy.
Yeah, and that's an ugly thought, but I have to agree with you because we've got crickets from mainstream media. They're ignoring this story for the most part, and I think that you're right. It has to be intentional because why would you skip it otherwise? Wouldn't this be something you would think your audience would appreciate, that they'd want to know that maybe it's time to go in and add that two-factor authentication to go change their passwords, move things around, maybe lock down their credit bureaus? Because, the phishing campaigns off this are going to be crazy. Imagine the phone call, Sam, where the guy is reading right off your passport. He's got everything, and he's trying to get some final confirmation. He said, hey, I'm with so-and-so. Are you passport number, blah, blah, blah? Is this your date of birth? Oh, well, it's important that I've connected with you. Think about how much credibility that adds if you're running an operation from one of those Asian telecom rooms,
Well, and think about know your client too. Why do they have to know everything about me? I get they have to have a login. I get that they have to have enough information on me. But why did every single company collect every bit of data on you, whether it's necessary or unnecessary, all the time anyway, knowing full well it's only a matter of time till they're breached?
Well, when you start connecting this with the DNA evidence that's out there, Sam, they're going to be calling you for a stool sample next week just to make sure they know exactly what you're eating every day.
Yeah, see, and that's really where they're headed. And so I don't believe it's by mistake. Now, a lot of the small to medium companies that use systems like login authorization systems and everything else, I don't mean that the average company next door means ill to you. They're just following protocols and circumstances that they're dragged into, so to speak. But I'm telling you, this data collection gathering is intentional, and it will be. Let me write this down. It will be used against you, Lance.
Yeah, I agree. Information's a weapon. Never use it unless you have to. But, of course, in this case, they want everything.
And isn't it interesting that when we had Greg and Catherine over at True the Vote, they said this Mongo database had no password, right?
Yes.
Well, now this other one you're talking about, no password, right?
Yeah, there seems to be a pattern there, but shh, don't talk about the pattern, Sam. No pattern.
It doesn't have anything to do with Jeff, though. If you think that, though, you're part of the conspiracy. You got it?
Exactly. I do.
All right, Lance, my friend, we appreciate you and all that you guys do. Lance Migliaccio and George Ballantine are known for the Big Mig, thebigmig.com. They're every weekend on radio, Liberty News Radio. They're also available on Rumble, Twitter, YouTube, everywhere else. Check it out, The Big Mig. They also do cryptocurrency shows. Check out their crypto stuff. They do a phenomenal job helping you understand crypto, breaking it down just for you, keeping an eye on the ball as this interesting digital currency reality develops. Thank you, Lance.
Thank you, Sam. Appreciate it. Thank you to the audience for your time today.
And I'm Sam Bushman. This is the one and only Liberty Roundtable Live, syndicated by lovingliberty.net. Spread the word, share the love, and God save the Republic of the United States of America.